Last summer, North Korea tested its first intercontinental ballistic missile. The technology Donald Trump said wouldn't happen. But it did. Again. And again. Along with the country's most powerful nuclear test.
I think the North Koreans have an ICBM that can deliver a large nuclear weapon to the United States.
They will be met with fire and fury.
In response, there were threats.
Things will happen to them like they never thought possible.
Personal insults.
Little Rocket Man is on a suicide mission for himself. He is a sick puppy.
This is writing North Korean propaganda for them.
Both sides warned the situation was on the brink of conflict.
If war comes, make no mistake, the North Korean regime will be utterly destroyed.
This president and his administration are considering limited military options more seriously than any of his predecessors.
But then came the Winter Olympics in South Korea. The first talks in 2 years, the first unified Olympic team, and an unexpected truce. The new year in North Korea started with fireworks and Kim Jong Un's annual speech. Most of the focus was on his claim to have a nuclear button on his desk and the entire US mainland now in range. But then he offered to talk to the South and send a delegation to their Olympic Games. There had been fears North Korea would disrupt these events. Now there were soaring statements of optimism and the Olympic spirit.
The Olympic Winter Games Pyeongchang 2018 are hopefully opening the door to a brighter future on the Korean peninsula.
For the first time, Olympians from the North and South will compete as one in women's ice hockey. Inside the new Olympic Stadium, both politics and sport will be on show.
So this is where the two Koreas will march together under the unified flag in what the South Korean president is already calling the Peace Olympics. The question is whether this is really the start of something significant, a lasting, peaceful resolution, or just a temporary pause in hostilities.
Look, our security is at stake, okay? We cannot live with nuclear-armed North Korea.
Professor Jong Un is a special advisor to South Korea's president. He wants talks with realistic demands.
If we ask North Korea to disarm its nuclear arsenal from the beginning, it would be impossible for North Korea to come to the dialogue and negotiation under that assumption, right? Therefore, we got to have some kind of low expectation. Maybe freezing North Korean nuclear and missile activities would be the most important step.
But others say the Kim family rulers have broken every agreement they entered into and believe Kim Jong Un, like his father, is playing for time and respite from sanctions.
저는 개인적으로 말하기를 남북 관계를 평화적으로 대화로 해결한다는 것은 그 미친 짓이다, 크레이지하다라고 저는 말합니다. 왜? 지난 70년 동안 그렇게 북한한테 거짓말을 당해놓고도 아직도 정신을 못 차리고.
North Korea better get their act together, or they're going to be in trouble like few nations ever have been in trouble in this world.
President Trump is said to be following a strategy of maximum pressure.
Do not try us.
But so far, repeated warnings.
Today, for the 10th time, this council stands united against the North Korean regime.
And successive rounds of UN sanctions have failed to halt the regime's weapons program. His officials talk about learning the lesson of Iraq and Libya. Surrender your nuclear arsenal, and you surrender your grip on power.
I don't think that there is a level of pain we could inflict on North Korea that would get Kim to give up his weapons. I mean, from his perspective, if he gives up those nuclear weapons, his tenure is over.
Just over a couple of hours' drive from the Olympic Village, this is what's known as the Truce Village, where the ceasefire was signed at the end of the Korean War.
Those of you to my left now stand in communist North Korea, while those on the other side is still relatively safe within the Republic of Korea.
But with no peace agreement in place, both sides remain on permanent guard, on the front lines of a conflict never ended, just frozen in time.
We've been given strict rules about what we're able to do here. We've all been given these press armbands to wear because over there is North Korea. And everyone here is very aware that everything they do is being monitored by the other side. And this is a real reminder for all of the optimism around these Olympic Games that the reality on the ground here hasn't changed. This peninsula is still divided and these countries are technically still at war.
These are Marines and U.S. 7th Division troops advancing into Seoul under enemy fire.
The Korean War started in 1950. In the 3 years of fighting that followed, more than 2.5 million people died.
It is reported that the Reds have 30,000 men defending Pyongyang.
Those in the north are not told that their leader, Kim Jong Un's grandfather, started this war. They're told that they were attacked by the United States. So now they need nuclear weapons to protect themselves. Since coming to power in 2011, the current leader has been pictured taking personal charge of that, as the pace of testing and the range of those missiles has increased.
I think the North Koreans have an ICBM that can deliver a large nuclear weapon to the United States. I think the place where it gets complicated is how reliable is it. From a kind of 10,000-foot policy view, I think we should get used to the idea that they can do this.
That prospect may not be quite as unsettling as it sounds. Kim Jong-un's nuclear ambitions are well documented, but what is less often discussed is the other half of his strategy, what he refers to as Byung-jin, or parallel advance.
The first half is the nuclear deterrent, but the second half is economic development. And despite the resources he's put into the missile program and nuclear program, despite the sanctions, which have been steadily increasing, everything we see suggests the North Korean economy has been growing under his leadership. So, you know, that's the piece of Kim Jong Un that gives us some hope. I mean, that's where he looks like actually a typical East Asian dictator.
Our great teacher, great leader, great commander, and great helmsman, Chairman Mao, is the red sun in our hearts.
This is not the first time the United States has encountered an adversary determined to develop nuclear weapons. In the 1960s, these were the celebrations of China's new status as a nuclear power under Chairman Mao.
China underwent serious economic sanctions and embargoes from both the Soviet bloc, when the Soviet-China relationship went bad, and from the American bloc during the Cold War. You know, given the similarity of Chinese political ideology decades ago and the political ideology in North Korea today, I think many Chinese officials believe they better understand the thinking and the logic of the North Korean leadership.
It was a question I had for Chinese experts. I said, you know, why don't the North Koreans just be like you guys, you know, and why don't they, focus on their economy, and they can still be a communist party, but like China. And the Chinese, one answer I got was, they are like us. They're doing what we did. This is precisely our path.
But for Donald Trump, that path would mean doing the one thing successive US presidents have sworn never to do, accepting a nuclear-armed North Korea. The politics of that are hard. It's much easier to make bombastic threats.
If we take that option, it will be devastating. I can tell you that. Devastating for North Korea. That's called the military option.
But the problem with every military option is the same one all of his predecessors faced, the danger to the South Korean capital, Seoul.
There's been some talk lately about the merits of a limited military strike on North Korea, what's been called the bloody nose strategy in the US. The logic is that Kim Jong Un would understand that this wasn't the start of an all-out attack, and he's not suicidal, so he would sit back, take his medicine and the message that the United States is serious. But if they're wrong about that, this city and the millions of people who live here would be within artillery range of the North Korean response.
It's really, I think, one of the craziest ideas I've ever heard.
The risk is this, look, ultimate losers in any kind of military clash will be South Korea.
I think a bloody nose strategy is the worst of all worlds. On one hand, to use force in order to send some sort of symbolic message, you're risking retaliation and potentially nuclear retaliation for that.
The Nixon administration actually had this exact same problem with North Korea in 1969. The North Koreans shot down a US reconnaissance airplane, and there was a huge debate about how to strike North Korea in order to show them that we were very displeased. And at no point could they come up with a strike that they were sure the North Koreans wouldn't confuse for the beginning of an invasion.
There are no good options, but what is certain is that even as North Korea's athletes arrive for these games, back home, the regime's capability is advancing. And this truce won't last forever. When the Olympic flame goes out, the missile tests and the military drills will resume, with both sides moving closer to the brink.